just like seeing her for the first time.
Finding it a year later somewhere in Thefrist, in the middle of the mountains. The sounds of blows were heard, and sparks were visible. The hunter struck with his sword. The monster put a shield in front of itself in time, blocking the blow, causing the man's blade to crack and then break completely, making him very nervous after that. The monster hit him, throwing him back, but he was able to land successfully, and stuck the broken sword into the ground, helping himself to stop. Then he looked up at the monster and, seeing that it decided to attack him in a jump, jumped to the side and avoided the blow in time. He landed next to his team members and sighed heavily, and the enemy turned in their direction and threw AF. Look at them, this is the Lord Danger level D. This is a high-ranking null. His physical abilities are higher than that of an ordinary null. The null's skin is not only physically tough, but also resistant too. Magic the Hunter stood up and extended his trembling hand forward, asking what he was doing in an E-rank dungeon. Even D-rank hunters, said he. Was hard to fight at that moment. Then I'll rush to attack, but the man with the shield reacted in time and stepped forward, blocking his attack with held his hands, trembled from the powerful blow, and he shouted that they could not last that long. Let them had. They wanted, but they had to deal at least some damage to him. The swordsman's face darkened with horror, and he thought this was the death god of low-level hunters, but the No Lord was called that for more than just his physical abilities, since monsters at this rank are vulnerable too. Magic, any hunting team relies on it, but this monster, Defisac logic, the hunters who were confident in low-level magic were afraid for the first time. The price of such impudence and negligence is usually the complete destruction of the team. They only have one physical damage dealer. Buv's bad at melee, and his weapon is broken. There's nothing else to fight with, so what should he attack him with? Grabbed his head and thought that if he knew it would be like this, he wouldn't be greedy and would have gathered as many people as possible. Wow would have thought that his desire to use as few people as possible and hire a mage would backfire on him. Suddenly a ringing sound reached his ears, and he looked to the side. See, being a guy chopping magic stones with a pickaxe, Ethis is an assistant. He doesn't participate in the battle, but plays the role of a collector and loader of cider sources such as magic stones. Anyone with even a small amount of mana sensitivity can handle this, so they didn't get much recognition and respect among the awakened. This is just the team's errand boy. The hunter said in Larambard that they had an assistant and thought that they were about to die, and he was just mining crystals. Suddenly what he saw made him surprised. The pickaxe in the hands of this assistant simply disappeared into thin air, and he thought, does he have the ability to create high quality? Cannot be expected, but they can still use it, he loudly called out to the assistant, after which he turned around. It was Junio. The man quickly approached him and asked cadexedly, is he a creator? Does he know how to make swords? He confirmed his words, and he showing his broken blade asked him to make him a sword, preferably a strong one. MC apologized and reminded that he is an assistant, not a support. At these words, the swordsman shuddered and exclaimed that it was not the time to say such things. Doesn't he see that they are about to die if they fail to cope with the boss? Then he will die. To Junio sighed, heavily reluctantly agreeing to his request, then began to create, and said that he had one condition: when they clear the dungeon, they must all forget about his ability. When they start dividing the loot, then he wants to get as much as a support usually gets, if everyone agrees. Then he will help. The man looked at the new weapon in his hand in surprise, and then exclaimed with displeasure that for someone who could not become a creator and works as an assistant, the quality is quite mediocre. He thinks that he can clear a dungeon with just a weapon. This is simple. And how can he forget what he saw? Junio smirked and said that it was funny. The weapons in the hands of Theothers began to change, and he said that a good weapon is a necessary element for clearing a dungeon. After that he extended his hand to him with a wide smile and guaranteed that as long as they have this element, they will be able to clear the dungeon sometime later in the Overkill Guild, one of the 3 largest guilds in Korea. A girl named Miss walked down the hallway and stopped at the huge doors, after which she knocked, and Youngshin, sitting at the tabline, the room allowed her to go. She addressed him as the guildmaster and said that the association had sent a cooperation request. He asked if it was about the errors in the dungeon ranks. She confirmed his words and said that at first glance, it was a normal cooperation request, but it seemed like they were willing to pay as much as they said. He frowned slightly and turned his gaze to the system window, asking, "They don't have a choice, do they?" There was hardly another awakened who could enter the forcibly closed gate. The system window displayed news about recent events. Another, a rank-out dungeon, appeared. Fortunately, it was cleared successfully. He looked at the group photo of the team that cleared the dungeon. Suddenly he noticed a familiar face among them. He noticed Junio, and thought that he had effing seen him before. A rank dungeon appeared in Kodan a couple of weeks ago. He was sent to the area. So he was at the scene, and he had definitely seen it there, according to the data. He was an assistant, even if new ones appeared. Chances of a bug in a dungeon are still small, and the cases of bug ranks with survivors can be counted on one hand, but this assistant was a member of a team that had survivors not just once but twice already. It can't be a coincidence. Who said that it seems like more and more bug-ranked dungeons have been appearing lately. A D-ranked dungeon a few days ago that became a B-ranked dungeon, and the entire team was instantly wiped out, the leader said. Bath Hunter Association must be in a lot of trouble. She added that there were a lot of people criticizing the association. After all, it was their job to analyze, predict and announce the dungeon ranks. Tion closed his eyes and rubbed his chin in confusion, thinking that that guy from the association must be suffering right now. He said, "Thos with the encroachment skill are getting more and more. They need to set up an additional committee to monitor the situation." What about what he asked her to look into? She replied that she searched everywhere, but couldn't find a single weaponsmith who was a rank or higher, but she received a B-rank weapon from a Japanese blacksmith. Does he want to check it out? He replied that she knew that any weapon below a rank would be destroyed when he used the skill, and wouldn't last long. He stood up from his chair and decided to start by saying that many guns are supports. Let her search some more, otherwise he'll ruin all his weapons like that. She replied that she understood everything. And then there was a knock on the door, and the vice gold leader named Mangan looked into the office, saying that something had happened. Tian got up from the table and walked towards him, asking what was wrong, and he replied that it was an urgent message from the association. He checked the location. It was a D-rank dungeon where the newbies went as a free tag team. He asked what the rank was now. He replied that it was now rank C. And Tion, after passing its side, and said that they couldn't lose the newbies. It seemed like an emergency, so he would get personally. Soon they arrived at the gate location, where the journalists had gathered. Noticing the presence of Overseer's guildmaster, they immediately turned around and started taking pictures of him, asking him to answer more questions. One of them asked him to say something about the ongoing errors in the dungeon ranks. He heard that the Hunter Association sent Overkill a proposal for cooperation. Is this true? Did he come in person because his guild members were inside? He ignored them, and the worried girl who was waiting for him thanked him for coming, and said that she didn't know he would come in person. He asked how the situation was. She turned to the gate and replied that the attack team that entered was 6 hunters, 2 supports, and 1 assistant. They were all stronger than necessary, but the numbers didn't matter since the dungeon was now C rank. He asked how long ago they entered. She replied that it was about hours ago, and he, coming closer to the gate, said that he did not know how many of them were still alive, but he would do everything in his power. She bowed slightly and thanked him, after which he, along with the guild members, looked at the gate and threw his case on the ground. He extended his hand to the secretary so that she would give him something, after which she reached into the bag with her hand, from which a bright light burst out and took out Asword. From there, she is a bank support who specializes in opening subspace, even in closed places. After that she hand death weapon to the guildmaster, and he, covering the blade in flames, sharply waved his hand, striking the gate. High's encroachment skill activated, and a small crack appeared in the gate, which grew in size after a second. His skill, which forcibly breaks its way to the accumulation of mana, is capable of destroying any wall in the form of a barrier, including the gate. However, when moving to another dimension, the encroachment skill only affects the user after such a blow. His sword broke, and he handed it back to Here's hands, and she asked him to be careful. He agreed. Anthon decided to go inside and pass through the crack in the gate. Once inside, he immediately stopped and looked around, feeling a different temperature and more humidity. Here, considering the disgusting smell there, must be reptiles living here, judging by the fact that the floor is clean. It is a somewhat intelligent monster, considering the rank of the dungeon. The answer is quite a question. Lizard man, quite old. Humanoid reptiles are D-rank monsters. They live in tribal groups compared to other humanoid monsters. They live quite a long time life. Span proportional to intelligence and combat power. He noticed many monster corpses on the floor, stabbed with swords and arrows, and then headed to another room, thinking that by looking at the corpses he can guess the size of the group and their fighting strength, as well as the level of the injured party determined in the preliminary calculation. They must be dead by now. As he moved forward, he suddenly heard the sounds of fighting and voices. He can't help but think the worse. But when he arrived at the place where the team was, he saw something he didn't expect at all. The monsters were attacking, but the hunters blocked and immediately struck, acting in concert as a team. The girl fired an arrow, thought pierced the monster's body, and Tion froze in surprise and thought, are they winning? On the contrary, judging by their movements, the lizard men are much stronger. Suddenly his thoughts were interrupted by what he saw in the next second. One of the monsters knocked the weapon out of the hunter's hands, and he looked up at him in horror. Realizing that he was about to deal him a powerful blow, Tion rushed to help, thinking that it was not too late, and then suddenly lizard man dealt a powerful blow, but his attack was blocked by a suddenly summoned sword, which surprised him greatly. The hunter's breathing quickened from fear, and Guildmaster, who ran to help him, stopped and thought that it was magic, but immediately discarded this thought, realizing that it was a weapon made in the air. But who made it? He turned around and saw the assistant standing next to the crystals who summoned this sword. Noticing his Gazayunio turned his head to the side, and their eyes met. He looked at the team members who were currently fighting the monsters, and began to count them. When he counted 9 people, he turned his gaze to Tion and pointed his finger at him, saying that he was the TH. This is strange, he clearly remembers that. 9 entered. The Guildmaster frowned and asked what he was doing it. That moment, one of the team members blocked the attack, but the monster was stronger and was thrown back. The mage immediately ran to his aid, and the lizard man raised his sword above his head, preparing to strike. Seeing this, Tion became worried and immediately rushed to attack, taking out his sword, and MC looked down at his open suitcase and thought that he did not expect Yunnan to personally come to his aid. He is carrying around a weapon Thoth does not even use. Is it a spare? The hot wind caused by Tian's strike reached at his face. He covered his blade in flames and pressed harder on the opponent's sword, breaking through his block. Anthon told the guys behind him to step back. The mage helped his comrade stand up and thanked him for his help, after which Tian knocked the weapon out of his opponent's hands and then reignited the flames and rushed past him, simultaneously delivering powerful blows. The monster's body was covered in numerous cuts, green blood spurting out, for its corpse fell to the floor with a thud. Tian looked down at his sword, which was already pretty worn out, unthought that it wasn't even fighting at full strength yet. It was a bank weapon, but it was just too weak. He looked up and saw the lizard man running towards him. The monster swung at him, and defended himself, then jumped back, and ended up next to Junio, who called out to him. He asked, does this happen every time he uses a skill? It's a lot of wear and tear. Right. The others rushed at the monster, and the guild leader asked, is he asking for trouble? Suddenly blue sparks appeared in front of his face, and a weapon was created from them. Junio handed it to him, and asked him to take height and not ruin his poor weapon. He looked up at the sword in surprise and thought, did he create this with one's wing? He is a weapon smith, and not just a simple one, but a very skilled one. He noticed the pick in his hand and thought, why is he an assistant? He heard that low-rank supports sometimes enter Thetingen as assistant, but suddenly MC interrupted his thoughts. He took the broken sword from his hand and said, Thoth, there is one condition. After clearing and exiting the dungeon, must forget about him and his skills. Tion reached out his hand to the new sword and asked if he thought he could forget just because he wanted to. In response to his words, Jun began to destroy the sword, and said that if not, then let him go, and slash everyone with his high-class weapon. The guildmaster sighed, and thought that the weapon would be destroyed once he used a skill on it. He thought a few more wouldn't hurt. He took the sword, and replied that he understood everything and also promised him to forget about Ito, which he smiled and said that if that's the case, then let him go and burn. After that, the guildmaster rushed Totak and approached the furious lizard man, and then lit the sword with a bright flame and attacked, causing tongues of flame to appear around them. The monster used more strength to try to hold back his attack, but in the end, his sword broke, and Tion thought that he just wanted to reflect the attack, but his weapon shattered. He looked down at the blade and thought that the control was noticeably better than usual. Is the weapon itself that much stronger? He glanced at Junio, who was Gavin Crystals at the time, and thought, is he a weaponsmith who can create at least a bank weapon? At that moment, the monster decided to attack him with a broken weapon. He raised the sword above his head to swing, and Tion prepared himself and thought that this was interesting. Now he will see what it can do. Can have strength in it. With these thoughts, he plunged the tip into the monster's stomach and then used the skill causing blades flame to penetrate the monster's body and come out in a bright flash. Without wasting time, the guildmaster leaned on the monster's shoulder and jumped behind it, then jumped up and raised his sword above it, blazing with fire again. He plunged the blade into the monster's head and pierced it through, causing it to scream loudly. Anthon blood spurted out of its mouth and the corpse fell to the floor. Tion, at this time, brought the blade to his face and carefully examined it, noticing that there was not a single scratch, so he needed at least this. Suddenly his thoughts were interrupted by the voices of his guild members, who happily called out to him and said that they were alive. Thanks to him, he walked towards them and said that it seemed like no one was seriously hurt, which made him happy enough. The guys paid attention to Junio and said that with their weapon, they couldn't even fight, but they held out hands to him. The guild leader himself turned his gaze to him, thinking about something, and then approached him and asked what his name was. He asked why he needed to know the name of some assistant. He replied that they should at least know each other by name. He said his name, and Junio, having zipped up his backpack, turned to him, after which he stood up and approached him. Saying his name, he looked at the man behind him and said that he would leave the man a stone at the entrance. He agreed with a confused expression, and when Gino was about to leave, Tion stopped him and asked him to wait, offering him to come with him to the boss room, let him leave his things here. He took the backpack from his hands, and Junio said that he was just an assistant. The guild leader handed the backpack to the man and said that a bug had already been discovered in this dungeon. If they didn't defeat the boss, no one would be able to get out. Bid an assistant or a support. He replied that he could just defeat the boss. Tion said that as he had already seen no weapon could handle his skills, no matter how capable he wouldn't it be pointless if he destroyed the weapon he created. The MC replied with a hint of irritation that his weapon couldn't break, and he responded that he thought, so, they are in a dungeon with a bug. The creatures living here are not ordinary lizard men, and if the boss is the same, then extra caution does not hurt. Junio sighed heavily, deciding to agree then threw the backpacks on the floor and walked up to him, asking does he just need to come with him. Soon they found themselves in a huge hall lit by torches frozen at the very entrance. They saw a throne at the other end of the hall on which sat the Lizard Lord of Danger. Level C+, this is the final form of a lizard man. After more than a years of survival and molting, despite its small size, it is several times superior in strength and speed to its relatives. Junio frowned, and Tion said with a smile that they should ignore the existing danger levels and information on them. They will just end this as soon as possible. They both used their abilities, and Tion said that if they lingered, the weapon might fall apart. MC replied with displeasure that he had already said that it would not fall apart if he did not believe it. Then let him check the Lizard Lord.